This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Now, there are very few business processes that are so fundamental to growing a business as recruitment is. The ability to consistently hire the right people who succeed in the role, who empower those around them, and who really maintain the brand of the organization just creates such a big competitive advantage. Yet the way we recruit hasn't evolved much for the last 100 years, despite huge advances in technology and in organizational psychology. And the fact that there's sort of a generally accepted wisdom that recruitment processes as they are today are not that great at predicting future success in the role. And that's what we're going to dig into today. What can change, what should change, and how we're going to go about doing that. And we've got a fantastic guest for you to dig into that topic. Our guest today is Perry Briody, a career talent acquisition leader who currently specializes in helping small and mid-sized companies build hiring processes that work. Erica, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Felix. It's lovely to be here.
So, big question to start with then. What is it that companies get wrong, particularly SMEs, when it comes to recruiting?
It's a good question. I think the connectivity with the talent and the communication with the talent is so crucial nowadays. And, the supply and demand in the market is there, and therefore you have a lot of competition. I think the biggest thing that companies get wrong is that they don't communicate the process to the candidate. So the candidate's aware of what is happening in the process. They don't ask the question, how far along are you in a process with anybody else, so that they can either speed up their process or delay their process based on the response. In the end, it's pure communication. We're relying a lot on technology nowadays, especially with AI, etc., that coming back to the basics of just letting people know where they stand in the process is key.
And so rarely done. I feel like with the hundreds of applications that most roles get, it's somewhat overwhelming. And I think we'll probably come back to AI and the potential for that within that communication, because I think it's really powerful. How about when it comes to selecting the right person? Because I think what you spoke about before was around obviously the candidate experience and whether or not once you've found the person you want to hire, whether they actually accept the role.
Yeah. Or
whether you lose them to a competitor. But how about when it comes to choosing the right person for a role, assuming that they'll accept the offer?
This has been an evolution. I've worked in very large organizations like the Novartises of the world, the GEs, where I've been executive head of talent, to working for smaller companies, startups, SMEs, and then having my own company. All of that has evolved through time. But I think the most important thing about selecting a candidate is understanding their traits. And what I mean by that is bringing into the hiring process some form of assessment so that you can understand the DNA of the individual and how their mind works. Because individuals come in a lot of times and they try and adapt their style to the environment of the company. But just think what more you could get from them if they actually already had that style and that DNA and those values up front. And then you could just help them get the most from it. So I believe that if you bring in some form of assessment into the hiring process, not making it the sole predictor of the hire, but actually bringing it in as part of the steps to make the final decision, will help you make a better candidate experience, as well as ensure that you're bringing in the right candidate, not just for today, but for tomorrow.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I've definitely seen in my own, we also at Instant Impact specialize in that sort of SME market. I have seen a reticence when designing recruitment processes with senior HR leaders, senior business leaders. I've seen a reticence to use psychometrics or workplace strengths for fear of putting the candidates off, of I guess creating too much work that's non face to face. How do you overcome those sorts of, what would you say to those sorts of concerns, or what do you say?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's very important that you manage the steps well, right? So the first step should be an interaction with someone. But if you said to the candidate, look, we want to make sure that we're going to get the best from you and you're going to get the best from us. And we're going to do a small assessment. It's going to be part of the hiring process. I will give you your feedback, explain to you what the assessment shares. Because in the end, we want to make the right choice for your career as well. And what we do is we take this assessment, then we use it as a coaching tool. So when we bring you on board, we can help you with your derailers, make sure that we are helping you with performance and coaching so that you can be even better and meet your true potential. So I think as long as you communicate and explain what they are going to get out of the assessment, then I think it's okay.
That's really interesting. And as you were speaking, I think something else occurred to me, which is, if you go into an organization where you're, I suppose, outside of your intrinsic strengths, it can be exhausting. I mean, basically masking elements of your personality or of your working style so that you fit into another organization. I think there's only so long you can really do that and succeed for. So as you were saying in your answer, it's a benefit to both parties, isn't it?
Yeah. In fact, I'm doing a project right now. I'm doing some contract work for a group called Culture Index. And we do a lot of assessments with senior leadership. They've already been hired at this point, but we're just trying to understand if they're still in the right fit for the evolution of where the company's going in the future. Half of them are working completely against their natural traits. So you have an assessment of their natural traits and an assessment of how they are adapting in the workplace to their current role. We're seeing some of them almost opposite. So the stress that those individuals are going through, no wonder why we have so many heart attacks and issues in the workplace, right? Because people are working against their traits. So people that are introverts are suddenly being thrown to being extroverts. People that are having to follow rules, that are a rule breaker, that is someone that is very spontaneous and creative, are being pushed into a box where they shouldn't be. So if you could get the person's natural traits and actually put them in the roles that fit their background, especially for people coming out of universities, for instance, right, where you don't have the experience behind them to know where they fit. If you had that up front, it's kind of like a GPS tool. It's giving you the direction of where this person should be going and where you can get the most from them and how to get them there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that's just absolutely fascinating that you find that proportion of people are in a sort of, I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology here, but almost like a code switch role where they're behaving one way when naturally they'd be in another. Do you find any, out of interest, do you find any correlation between whether people, between sort of demographics and whether people are more likely to be in a role where they're acting contrary to their natural style? Do you find, for example, that women are more likely to do that, or men, or?
Yeah, we don't have any specific statistics that are stating men over women, but what we are finding is mid to senior level management, the number of people that are being, especially for instance, salespeople that are going into a sales management role, that you're taking the best of someone that's doing a great job in one role, you're pushing them into another role, thinking it's promotion or something that's going to be more beneficial for them. And they're not doing as well because the things that made them super in the role beforehand, their traits, do not work well in the following role. And so I think where you see, especially senior level management, is when companies are evolving or growing significantly, the person that you hired originally to start the company or to get the company going is not necessarily going to be the same person that you're going to want to take the company IPO or to build into other markets. And so understanding that what you're dealing with is going to be key. So no, I don't see any direct correlation. I just find the individual sometimes is so off in their role based on what naturally they're comfortable with, which worries me especially for the younger generation, because it just means that we're seeing all these issues with depression and no work-life balance. But if people are doing things that they're good at and they're comfortable with, I think they wouldn't be pushing themselves out of their comfort zone quite as much, and maybe better at the role.
Yeah, and look, there is definitely, and I've seen this anecdotally through growing Instant Impact. When people are good at their job, they tend to enjoy it more. There is definitely a correlation between that. When it's something that you enjoy, it tends to be something you're good at as well. And I don't know which one of those starts the process, but
yeah, it's very true. I mean, in the HR world, we call it discretionary effort, right? So we have correlated severe increases in revenue based on discretionary effort from an employee. So going the extra mile, going above and beyond. And so we measure that, and we call it energy units, right? How many energy units is someone bringing to the table? So if you got someone, like you said, that really loves their job and is doing a great job and is actually aligned with their traits and what they're good at, their energy level goes up. Therefore, discretionary effort goes up. Therefore, revenue dollars go up, or pounds, right? It's I don't want to say it's not rocket science, but it really is. If someone likes what they're doing and they're good at it, it's going to, they're going to go well. They're going to do well, and they're not going to see it as a job. They're going to see it as something they enjoy doing.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go through the process. So we've got someone in the interview process. They've got their traits finder, strengths. I'm sure we'll go into that a little bit more detail later. Do we need, before we make a decision on that, presumably you also need to understand the strengths and the traits of the team that they're joining and the role that they're going into? Could you just talk us through how that should work? So if we're doing this kind of work just on people we're hiring, or on the existing teams, or the management, how do we correlate that to the business plans versus the business we are today? God, I'm getting breathless just talking about it. It would be really interesting just to see how, in your mind, sort of best practice works here.
Yeah. And so I think it starts off with, anyone that's going to be touching the candidate from a hiring process should be involved in helping determine what the profile of the candidate should look like. Like, do we need someone that is a trailblazer, that has strong leadership skills, that will take risks, that will, move forward and push us across the needle? If you already know that and you've all agreed upon the profile of the candidate, right, then you determine, okay, so when we put our applicant tracking system together, we actually do part of the process is to find out how these candidates, based on the questions we ask, match the profile, and then rank them accordingly, and start with them as the first candidates that you interview, right?
And that's fascinating. So we're doing it based on people who are hiring for their roles, on their intuition. Say, how good are we as humans at that decision making? We're hiring for this role. What sort of person do they need to be? Is that something that we're good at, or is that something where it's sort of prone to bias and you actually need a bit more structure in there?
Oh, it's definitely prone to bias. And what my expertise is, I build workshops to help the hiring process go from the beginning to the end. First, get the C-level agreed on the process and get their input. And then we roll it out for all the hiring managers. And then I build it into a train the trainer program, right? There is unconscious bias everywhere, right? And so part of the workshop that I do is helping people identify their unconscious bias by doing an assessment within the workshop, which is fun. But we all know what good looks like. And when we determine what that profile of the person is that we want, we also need to look at who their team is and who their hiring manager is. So you wouldn't want someone that is quite an introvert, that's very analytical, data-driven, being the manager of someone who is someone very fast-going and confident and out there making huge changes for the company. The match would not be there. So it all has to be connected. The dots have to be connected in order for it to be successful. You need to know that also the person you're hiring who has one profile would respect the person that the profile that they would be working for, and the team members around them. So Getting that right is key.
And when we're talking about bias, then we're talking obviously about innate characteristics that people have. You know, you can't change that element. So is there any risk around falling foul of equal hiring practices if
Mhm.
you're profiling the way that somebody thinks and operates, I guess, biologically, or I mean just the way that they are today? Well, it's not an amazingly asked question, but I think you get the
I
point.
know where you're coming from, Felix. I mean, unconscious bias exists and conscious bias exists, right? Being aware, getting your hiring managers to be aware of their unconscious bias is key, because then if you have a structured interview process, you are measuring apples to apples each time, right?
Mm.
You have behavioral based questioning based on attracting the traits of the candidate you're trying to bring into the role. And then you have a fair measuring process to make sure that everyone is being hired fairly. We can't change unconscious bias because everyone has those innate biases. But if the hiring manager is aware of them and you have a structured process to make sure that you are going through the best methodology to ensure that those biases do not come into play, then it at least takes out some of the unknown. If it was funny. I had someone the other day interview a candidate, and he was an executive, and I did an unconscious bias. But first, I did the interview with a candidate with him, and some of the things he was saying made me have some question marks. And so at the end of the interview, I actually said, help me understand, did you ever work in a gym or some kind of environment where health is extremely important to you? He said, yeah. He said, when all through college, I was working at a fitness company. I was doing all this muscle building and all of this. And I said, because you have an unconscious bias towards people that are overweight. Are you aware of that? And he said,
Really?
what are you talking about? And I said, I want you just to do this assessment for me and just go with it. And so he did this assessment, and yes, it came a strong bias towards overweight people. And I said, okay, now that you're aware of it, okay, now let's go through the structured process with the interview questions to make sure that you are hiring the most qualified candidate for the role. Okay. Because unless this person is in front of individuals or people that or a sales role or something where a certain look is part of the mandatory skills of the role, then that should not come up. And so you need to be aware of that moving forward when you are interviewing candidates. And it was a complete shock to him. He had no idea. But because I've been doing it so long, I immediately saw it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it takes a while to realize that a natural human trait is having biases, and we all have if anyone claims not to have them, they're lying. So I think once you're comfortable with that, then you can do something about it and you can start mitigating, can't you?
Well, Felix, how many managers do you know out there that hire almost the exact type of people like themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're comfortable with them. They get along. They know they can go out for a beer with them. They see themselves in the other person. But the trouble is, the world is not made up that way. You need a diversity of thought. You need diversity in the workplace. And therefore you need, because your clients are diverse, so you need that mixture. So understanding that up front is key.
So it's interesting. I often say that one of the big lies, or lie is probably a bit of a strong word, but one of the big fabrications of recruiting is that we're just recruiting the best fit for the best role in the organization. And I think that lost in the process is the fact that we're also, if we're recruiting for our own team, we're also recruiting someone we're going to sit next to every day, and we're going to spend time at company socials, and we're going to go to pitch meetings with them, and we're going to run their reviews. So I think there is that element, and don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not a supporter of hiring people only that you get on with. But do you think we could do a little bit more to build that social camaraderie element into recruiting so that we can do more to create a working environment where we do unlock those that discretionary effort that you were talking about before?
Yeah. The problem is in an interview process is people are putting their best foot forward, right? And so you don't always get to know what you're dealing with. And that's why I say, please, people, use a structured interview process. Don't just have a conversation, because at least then you can really understand past behavior is a strong predictor of future behavior, so that you can get them to delve back and then you can understand how they interact or how they do things. And you can actually bring the social element into that interview process. Tell me about a time when you had to be at a conference with your colleagues and you were multitasking. How did you go about making sure that all your colleagues were able to work effectively together? Pull it into the interview process if that is so important. But I always say, I think it's so important that you do my daughter just got a job and they did a Zoom call.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know she just graduated on Friday. I can't believe it. They're all off the payroll now. It's very exciting, Felix.
This is what we should have been talking about, Erica. That's amazing.
But the one thing that pulled her to one job over the other was that they did a Zoom call with all of the team that she'd be working with, to ask questions and get to know each other, because sometimes you don't have time to bring the short list of candidates in for drinks with the team, right? You just don't. But just doing that Zoom call where she could ask about the, what it's like, what's the environment, how long have you been with the company, what works, what doesn't work, do you do social things together, made her at ease. And she went with that role based on one extra step in a hiring process,
Wow.
which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And it sort of goes back to that point you were saying at the beginning, which is just, it's so important to build that candidate experience as carefully as you would an employee experience. So I'd love if you could just, maybe if we just go one step deeper into those, I guess, making those right human trait decisions, could you give us, maybe obviously not the full scientific methodology behind it, but what are the kind of traits that you see in humans, those human traits that you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Could you just give us some examples of what they are and how they then correlate into how they perform in the role? Or is that too broad a question?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are some, we work with 17 key traits, but I'll give you the key ones. One is autonomy, right? Where how comfortable they've been independent and running with things, taking the initiative, being comfortable as a change agent. That is some people have it, some people don't, right? It's not necessarily extrovert versus introvert. It's more of, is this person a builder, a creator, a developer, right? So that is a key trait that you want to know. There, another trait is, we call it, their pace. What pace do they have? Is someone very comfortable in a very fast-paced environment where they can multitask, get things done, keep moving? They need the environment where things are happening all the time, or is someone task-oriented and they like to sit down and just do one step after the other and do it very, very well? Okay, and they're process-driven. So understanding the pace of an individual is absolutely key. Because if you put someone that's very fast-paced and likes multiple things to work on into a little box where they are doing the same thing over and over and over again, they'll slowly die inside, right? So getting that right. And then we talk about compliance, right? So some people need rules and structure around them. They need to understand that there is a process, and they're comfortable with authority of people telling them what to do, and they need someone to tell them what to do. And when they get that, they will do it extremely well. There are other people that are not comfortable with that. They are very creative. They want to be innovative. They want to help drive change. They want to think out of the box. So putting one in the wrong box there can really, stifle their creativity. Yeah. And then, so besides like autonomy and pace and compliance and being able to deal with change, these are some of the key things that really make up the type of individuals that you're looking for in a company. If you want someone to do a step-by-step process and follow extremely well, that's one type of trait that comes from someone that is comfortable with doing that versus someone else. So just gives you an example of what I mean by traits.
Oh, it makes total sense. And I think what's really fascinating is we can't do a podcast episode without talking about AI. Otherwise people will be in a fury. But it feels like the more and more of the hard skills pieces, the hard skill piece of what we do gets taken over by artificial intelligence, that, the skills that we need to do our jobs changes every, whatever it is, 3 months, it feels like sometimes. Then these human traits, that's going to be, it feels like, more and more important to understand about people we bring in, so we can understand how quickly they can pick up new things, how they're going to operate in a dynamic environment, all of those sorts of questions. The
social traits. So that's one of the last traits that we deal with. Some people are culture makers. They are the people that like to talk, like to go rah for the company, be brand ambassadors, talk at the, at the different events. They are highly sociable, where other people are not sociable at all, but they are thinkers and they like to think and get things done. So AI cannot change that. That social aspect of an individual, that will never change. What AI is really good for, and I read a quote the other day, is AI will not change the world, but people that know how to use AI well will change the world. Bringing the human element in and helping AI, I did a training course in Chicago recently at a conference, and we talked about how to help AI be effective. And gosh, in the HR world, if you know how to use it well and you put the right policies together to make sure that your employees are utilizing it well, you can really save a lot of time. But you still need that voice from the individual to come in and say, okay, AI, help me build a job description, all right, that has these key minimum requirements in. Now take that job description and let's make it a fantastic, enthusiastic job advert, okay? Pulling it from a marketing tone now, so that we can take the key elements of the job description, but put it into an advert that now goes out to the market to entice that talent to bring it in. And by the way, AI, I want someone who is very strong in autonomy, that has great leadership skills, that is comfortable with change and being that change agent. So bring some of the key motivators of that type of individual into my job ad. Okay. AI for that is amazing. It's still not 100%. It'll take a long time to be 100% because it doesn't have a lot of the key elements that we need from the human aspect yet. But it can sure cut down a lot of time for the HR world.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see on that. That's a watching brief. Eric, I can't believe it. That's all we've got time for. But thank you so much for coming on. A really, really fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, Felix.